CreepyCorner stories.
Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I volunteered on the dark web to sit next to a dead man on a plane. I just figured out the horrifying way he died. You ever do something so stupid, so fundamentally wrong, that the second you commit to it, you feel your own body reject it? Like your skin gets clammy, your stomach knots up, and a little voice in the back of your head starts screaming at you to turn back. That was me when I accepted the job. I should have stopped the moment I clicked on that ad. Hell, I should have stopped the second I found myself on that part of the internet in the first place. The dark web isn't some edgy, cool hackerspace where you can buy fake IDs and weird mystery boxes for fun. That's what the dumb YouTubers want you to think. The real dark web is quiet. No flashy, cursed websites. No big do not click buttons. Just dead forums filled with people who don't speak like people, strange marketplaces with items that should not exist, and job listings. So many job listings. I was desperate. That's how it always starts, right? I was barely scraping by, bills piling up, my landlord accidentally shutting off my water, and my last meal being a cup of coffee I stole from a Starbucks trash can. The kind of desperate where you start thinking, man, maybe those scam emails aren't so bad. That's when I found the post. Companion needed for long-haul international flight. First class seat. No experience required. $5,000 upon landing. The description was short. No questions. No talking. Just sit next to someone for the duration of the flight. They would cover all expenses. Hotel, return ticket, food. It didn't make sense. Who the hell pays for something like that? If you don't want to fly alone, you just buy another seat. You don't hire someone. The logical side of my brain knew this was dangerous. Every fiber of common sense was practically pleading with me to close my laptop. Instead, I responded. A simple message. I'm interested. 5 minutes later, my phone vibrated. Not my laptop. My phone. The number was a string of gibberish. Unknown sender. Full name. Date of birth. Passport number. I hesitated. Then before I could stop myself, I sent it. The contract. 10 minutes later, a reply came with a PDF file. It was a contract. 6 pages long, filled with legal jargon I barely understood. But 2 sentences stuck out. Under no circumstances are you to inspect your companion's carry-on bag. Do not alert the flight crew to your companion's condition. What the hell did that mean? His condition? I nearly backed out right then. But then I saw the final clause. Compensation of $5,000 will be wired to your account immediately upon completion of the flight. Non-negotiable. I signed. The second I did, my phone buzzed again. Unknown sender. Check your email. I opened it and my stomach flipped. It was a first-class ticket from LAX to Tokyo. Departure in 48 hours. I expected fear, maybe some last-minute regret. Instead, all I felt was relief. Money. Food. A break from the miserable pit my life had become. I should have known. I should have known nothing comes that easy. The airport LAX felt wrong that day. Not in an obvious horror movie way. The sun was bright, The airport was packed. Families, businessmen, influencers posing for selfies with their overpriced Starbucks. Normal. But there was something in the air. I checked in, half expecting my ticket to be fake. But no, it scanned perfectly. The woman at the counter even smiled at me. "Enjoy your flight, sir." TSA was a blur. My heart was pounding so hard, I barely noticed getting through security. Every step closer to the gate made my skin crawl. It felt like walking towards something that knew I was coming. When I reached the terminal, my seat number was called immediately. First class priority boarding. I wasn't used to it. People in suits, influencers with designer luggage. Then there was me, wearing the same hoodie I'd slept in for the past 2 weeks. I stepped onto the plane, and that's when I saw him. The passenger seat 2A. He was already sitting there, not moving, not reacting. I knew something was wrong the second I laid eyes on him. At first, I thought he was just a frail old man, thin, pale, dressed in a black suit that looked too stiff, like the fabric was fighting to hold him together. A hat covered most of his head, and a pair of large round sunglasses hid his eyes. But then I saw his hands. They were resting on his lap. Gray, not just pale. Gray, like the color of meat left out too long. I swallowed hard, forcing myself into seat 2B. The smell hit me instantly. Not BO, not cologne. Something sour, something deep. The kind of smell that clings to you. The kind that makes your stomach roll before your brain can even recognize it. The flight attendants walked back and forth, smiling at me. Not once did they look at him. Not once. I adjusted in my seat. The man didn't move. Not to acknowledge me. Not to breathe. Not even to blink. His head was tilted just slightly forward, chin down. His posture was too perfect, like someone had positioned him there, and he had stayed exactly like that. I clenched my hands into fists. The contract. The fucking contract. Do not alert the flight crew to your companion's condition. This was a mistake. A big, big mistake. Then I saw it. The carry-on bag. A sleek black duffel, tucked neatly under the seat in front of him. The one thing I was explicitly told not to open. I stared at it for a long time. And then, the plane took off. I didn't know it yet, but I had just locked myself into the worst flight of my life. Because that man next to me, he wasn't asleep. He wasn't unconscious. He wasn't even human anymore. There's something fundamentally wrong about being close to a dead body. It's not like in movies. There's no grand reveal, no dramatic gasping moment where you suddenly realize, oh my God, he's dead. Number. It creeps up on you. Slowly. It starts with your instincts, that deep, primal part of your brain that knows when something in the room isn't alive anymore. Your skin goes cold. The air feels thicker. The silence becomes too loud. And then, little by little, the details start piling up. The way the smell lingers, too long in your throat, no matter how many times you swallow. The way his skin doesn't move when the turbulence shakes the plane. The way the flight attendants avoid looking at him like he isn't even there. I was sitting less than a foot away from a dead man, and I couldn't say a thing. The first hour, I told myself he was asleep. That was the easiest lie to believe. Maybe he was just deep in REM sleep. Maybe he was drugged up on sleeping pills. Maybe he was just one of those weirdos who sits perfectly still when they sleep. I kept glancing at his chest, begging to see movement, a breath, a twitch, anything. But he never moved, not a flinch, not a single involuntary muscle spasm. He was too still, and his His hands were rested on his lap, fingers lightly curled, like they'd been placed there, like someone had posed him deliberately. And then there was the smell. I don't know if you've ever smelled a dead body before, but it's not like rotting meat. It's worse. It's like fruit that's been left in the sun too long, mixed with something wet and sour, something that gets into your lungs and stays there. It wasn't overwhelming, not yet, but it was there, lingering, seeping into my clothes, my skin, my teeth. I wanted to gag, but I stayed quiet. The contract said not to alert the flight crew, so I sat there, fists clenched, trying to convince myself I was imagining all of this. Then I saw it, the carry-on bag. It was directly under his seat, a sleek black duffel, the same bag I was told not to open, and it was moving, just slightly, like something inside was shifting, stretching, breathing. My stomach clenched. I blinked, hard. Number? No, that's not possible. Bags don't breathe. Maybe the plane's vibrations were making it shift. Maybe the overhead air vents were causing the fabric to ripple. That's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew. That bag wasn't empty, and whatever was inside it was alive. The second hour, I started to panic. Not the kind of panic where you hyperventilate and start screaming. The deep kind. The kind that seeps into your spine and locks you in place. The kind that makes every single cell in your body feel wrong. I wanted to get up. I wanted to tell someone, but I didn't, because something worse was happening. I don't know how to explain it, but the air around me felt wrong, like it was pressing in, just slightly, like the temperature had dropped only in our row. And then I heard it, a sound I will never, ever forget. A wet breath, long, slow, wrong. I snapped my head toward him. He was facing me now. His head had turned, not like a person shifting in their sleep, not naturally. Number. His head was tilted at a strange, impossible angle, like the muscles in his neck had rotted away and left him loose inside his own skin. And his mouth was open, not wide, not like a scream, just slightly open, like a doll's mouth when the hinge gets loose. And from inside, that sound, that breath, was escaping. I nearly threw up. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 10. This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. When I opened them again, he was still looking at me, and his lips had moved, just barely, like he was trying to say something, like he was trying to whisper, "Help me." No sound, just the movement of his lips, but I felt the words. I knew what he was trying to say. My whole body went numb. I pressed the call button. I didn't care about the contract anymore. I didn't care if they kicked me off the flight, if I lost my $5,000, if I got arrested. I needed to get away from this thing. The flight attendant arrived in seconds, a polite, plastic smile plastered on her face. "How can I assist you, sir?" I turned to her, pointing at him. He's not okay. I think he..." But the words died in my throat, because when I turned back to him, his head was straight again, his mouth was closed, his body was perfectly posed, hands in his lap, like he hadn't moved at all, like I had imagined everything. The flight attendant's smile never wavered. "Is there anything I can do for you, sir?" I swallowed. No, I'm fine." She nodded, turned, and walked away. I stared at him, at his gray hands, his stiff, rotting suit, his mouth that had just moved. The call button was still lit up, but she had ignored it. She wasn't allowed to help me. I wasn't allowed to leave. I was trapped, on a 12-hour flight, sitting next to something that wasn't human anymore. And then, beneath the seat, The bag moved again. This time, it twitched violently. Something inside it was waking up. You ever feel time slow down? Not in a dramatic action movie way. I mean in a way that hurts. In a way that makes every second stretch and rot. Like the air around you is thickening, forcing you to choke on every breath. That's what the next few hours felt like. I was trapped in a frozen moment, in a seat that felt smaller by the second, next to a dead man who had moved, who had whispered, whose bag was alive. I didn't blink, didn't breathe, couldn't move, because if I did, I knew something would happen, something worse, and then it did. The third hour, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It had been bad before, but now it was pouring out of him, seeping into the air, coating the back of my throat like something thick and spoiled, like rotten meat stuffed with cheap cologne. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance at him out of the corner of my eye. His skin had darkened, not like a normal corpse. It wasn't blue. It wasn't purple. It was wrong, like something growing beneath the surface, something pushing outward, stretching his skin too thin, making it look wet. His lips were cracking apart, splitting open in jagged, unnatural ways, like something inside was forcing its way out. I had to swallow a scream. Then I heard the zipper, slow, deliberate, coming from below, from the bag. I looked down. The duffel was unzipping itself. I don't know how else to describe it. The zipper was moving, but there were no hands touching it. My pulse slammed into my skull. A cold, glistening slit was opening in the middle of the bag, parting like wet lips, revealing something pale inside, something that twitched. And then, from inside the bag, a single gray, wrinkled hand slid out. I choked on my own breath. The fingers were longer than they should have been, the nails split and blackened, twitching, reaching. I couldn't move. The hand twitched violently, fingers spasming, like it was adjusting to the air. Then, slowly, it gripped the edge of the seat. It was pulling itself out. I was going to pass out. I knew if I saw what was attached to that hand, I wouldn't survive it. I had to stop it. I had to close the bag. But I couldn't, because at that moment, the dead man's hand grabbed my wrist. The fourth hour, it was wet, not with sweat, not with anything human. His fingers felt loose, like the bones inside had rotted away, like his skin was just a sack of fluid barely holding together. And he squeezed, tightly, too tightly. A popping sound crawled up my forearm, my bones grinding against each other. I gasped. His grip tightened. The flesh of his fingertips split apart, revealing something black and writhing underneath. I couldn't even scream. He was leaning toward me now, his stiff body cracking at the joints, his rotting, misshapen lips parting again. And then, from deep inside his throat, a low gurgling sound, like something moving inside of him, like something waking up. His sunglasses slipped down his nose, and I saw them, his eyes, or rather, the things moving inside them. His eyeballs were wrong, not decomposed, not dried out. They were shifting. The whites of his eyes had turned transparent, revealing something underneath, something squirming. Tiny, black, root-like tendrils, writhing behind his pupils, pushing outward, crawling against the inside of his skin, like they were growing out of his skull. I lost it. I grabbed the duffel bag, and I slammed it shut. The thing inside it let out a sound, not a growl, not a screech. Something wet, something hungry. The man's grip loosened just slightly, just enough for me to yank my wrist away. just enough for me to reach for my call button, slam it over and over and over. The flight attendant was already there. She had been standing in the aisle, watching me the entire time. "Sir," she said softly, "please remain calm." I stared at her. I looked back at the dead man. His hands were folded neatly in his lap again. His sunglasses were back in place. His mouth was closed. The bag was sealed. None of it had happened, or at least, none of it was supposed to have happened. The flight attendant tilted her head slightly. "You understand, don't you?" Her voice was wrong. Software, almost mechanical, like she was repeating something she had said 1,000 times before. "You understand that you need to stay in your seat." I couldn't respond. My tongue felt numb. She smiled, not kindly, not warmly, a dead smile, the smile of something pretending to be human. Then slowly, she placed something in my lap, a warm towel, as if to say, "Relax, everything's fine," as if to say, "You're going to die on this plane, and it will look like you were never here at all." She turned and walked away. My body felt like it wasn't mine anymore. I stared at the towel in my lap. It was damp, but not from water. It was red, wet, seeping red, the same color oozing from the corners of the dead man's mouth. I wasn't just trapped anymore. I was part of something now, something that had already decided what was going to happen to me. And the worst part, the plane still had 7 hours to go. The warm towel sat in my lap, the deep red stain blooming outward like a slow-moving infection. The flight attendant was already gone, but I could still hear her words echoing in my skull. "You understand, don't you?" No, I didn't. I didn't understand what the hell was happening on this plane. I didn't understand what that thing next to me was. I didn't understand why nobody else could see it. But I did understand one thing. I was going to die up here. And no one would ever know what happened to me. The 5th hour, I didn't touch the towel. I just stared at it. My pulse hammered against my skull, my ears ringing so loudly I couldn't even hear the hum of the plane anymore. The blood had soaked through the thin fabric, staining my jeans, seeping into my skin. I had to get up. I had to move. I turned to the aisle, muscles coiled, ready to bolt. But something wasn't right. The plane was too quiet. I looked around. No one was moving. Not the businessmen, not the tourists, not the teenage girl watching Netflix on her phone. They were all frozen in place, mouths slightly open, eyes vacant, breathing but not present, like mannequins dressed in human skin. My stomach lurched. I turned back to the dead man, and my blood went ice cold. His neck had twisted further, not just a little, not a natural movement. His head was now fully turned toward me, chin over his shoulder, his body still facing forward, like his bones didn't matter anymore. His mouth had started to widen, his lips splitting at the edges, the flesh peeling apart in wet, glistening ribbons, stretching into something too wide, too inhuman. And then he exhaled. A thick, black fluid dribbled from between his teeth, spilling onto his lap in long, sticky strands. I choked on my own breath. The smell hit me instantly. Not just rot, not just death. Something chemical, something manufactured, like plastic melting over a gas fire. His chest rose, a slow, shuddering breath. And then, "You should not have opened the bag." I almost blacked out, because it wasn't his voice. It came from inside him, a layered, wet chorus of voices bubbling up from somewhere deeper than his throat, like a choir of drowning men speaking at once. My whole body locked up. "They told you not to open it." My lips trembled. I didn't. The voices clicked. A wet, slithering chuckle. Liar. And then the duffel bag twitched. A violent, jerking convulsion, like something inside had just slammed against the walls. The zipper peeled open again, but this time, I wasn't the one touching it. The bag unzipped itself. Something inside shifted, unfurling, unfolding, rising. The edges of the fabric pushed outward, bulging, stretching, as if something inside was trying to tear its way out. I couldn't move. The dead man's fingers crawled toward my thigh, pressing down just slightly, just enough to let me know, you belong to us now. I opened my mouth to scream, and then, all at once, time snapped back into place. The cabin roared with noise, conversations, laughter, the rustling of food wrappers, the sound of engines thrumming beneath us. Everything was normal. The bag was closed. The dead man was still, his hands folded neatly in his lap. The blood-soaked towel was gone, but my pants were still wet. I reached down, my fingers trembling, and touched something warm and sticky. I looked. My palm came back coated in red. I was still bleeding. The towel was gone, but the wound remained. A thin, clean slice along my thigh, as if something had opened me up with surgical precision. I pulled my shirt down over my leg, heart slamming against my ribs. I knew what had happened. The flight attendant had picked it up without hesitation. I didn't ask her where she took it. I didn't want to know. The rest of the flight passed in a blur. I kept expecting something else to happen, for the whispers to start again, for the lights to flicker, for the dead man to return to his seat. But nothing happened. And then, somehow, we landed. People woke up naturally. The world moved on, as if I was the only one who had seen what happened, as if it had been for me, and me alone. I stumbled off the plane, legs numb, mind fractured. I didn't care about the money anymore. I didn't care about anything. I just wanted to leave. And then, as I stepped into the terminal, my phone vibrated. One new message, from an unknown number. You did well. We will contact you again soon. I stared at the words. The phone slipped from my fingers, because somehow, deep in my gut, I already knew. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. Something had marked me. Something had reached out from inside that bag and taken a piece of me. And I had no idea what it had taken. The plane still had 6 hours left to go. I wasn't going to survive this flight. There are moments in life where you just know you've crossed into something you can't come back from. Not in the way of breaking a rule or making a mistake. Something deeper. A wrong turn in reality itself. That's where I was now. 6 more hours trapped on this plane, next to a thing that should not be alive, with a wound that shouldn't exist, and a bag that held something worse, something that had touched me, something that had taken something from me. I felt it, deep inside my bones. I wasn't the same anymore, and I didn't know what that meant yet. But I knew one thing. This plane was not going to land with me, still alive. The 6th hour, the cabin lights dimmed. It was the part of the flight where people either slept or numbed themselves with in-flight entertainment. I sat there, hands clenched on my knees, breathing too shallow, afraid to even shift in my seat. Every part of me was hyper-aware of the man next to me. His presence pressed against me like a sickness, like a fever I couldn't shake. And the smell, God, it had changed. It wasn't just rot anymore. It was thicker, meatier, like something wet and breathing. something fermenting in real time. I turned my head just slightly, and I almost screamed. His skin was moving, not shifting, not twitching, moving, like there was something beneath it, something pushing outward, stretching his flesh too thin, warping the soft, decaying meat of his face. The skin under his eyes bulged, pulsed, and then, for a split second, something pressed against it from the inside. A shape, a mouth, a tiny human mouth. Something was inside him. Something was wearing him. I bit down hard on my knuckle, forcing myself not to scream. I should have run. I should have gotten up right then and there, sprinted to the cockpit, and forced them to land this plane. But I couldn't, because at that exact moment, the bag moved again, and this time, it let out a sound. Not an animal noise, not a groan, or a growl, or even a scream. It was a wet clicking, like bones snapping underwater, like teeth grinding in raw meat. I stopped breathing. I wasn't imagining it. Something inside the bag was waking up. The 7th hour. I needed to do something. I knew that. If I stayed here, I was going to die. I didn't know how. I didn't know what this thing was, or what it wanted, but it was going to eat me, or wear me, or fill me up with whatever was living inside it. But the second I moved, the second I tried to leave, I felt it. A presence. I looked up. The flight attendant was standing at the end of the aisle, watching me, not blinking, not breathing, just standing there, like a broken animatronic stuck in a loop. And then, without moving her lips, I heard her voice. "Stay in your seat." It was inside my head. I felt it crawling through my skull, coiling around my thoughts, whispering right behind my eyes. "You understand, don't you?" My entire body went cold. I turned to the other passengers, desperate, hoping someone else was seeing this. But they weren't. They were asleep now. All of them. The entire plane had gone silent. Rows and rows of lifeless bodies, their chests moving just slightly, their mouths hanging open, like they weren't breathing on their own anymore, like something else was breathing for them. I gripped my armrest so hard my knuckles cracked. I turned back to the dead man, and his sunglasses had slid down his nose again. His eyes. God, his eyes. They weren't human anymore. The whites were gone, replaced by something dark and glassy, something reflective. And inside them, I saw my own reflection. But it wasn't me. It was something else. Something standing behind me. Something grinning. And then, a wet, thick voice leaked out of his throat. "We're almost ready." The 8th hour, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Every hair on my body stood on end. Something was standing behind me. I knew it. I could feel it. But I couldn't turn around. I wouldn't. Because if I did, if I saw what was there, I knew I would lose my mind. I stared straight ahead. I forced myself to focus. The bag. I had to do something about the bag. I couldn't run. I couldn't fight. But I could get rid of it. I reached down. My hand shook so violently, I thought my bones might snap. The moment my fingers brushed the cold, damp fabric, the thing inside twitched violently. A low, slithering growl escaped through the zipper, like 1,000 voices whispering inside a throat filled with water. I gritted my teeth and yanked it forward. And then, the entire plane shook. The lights flickered. The overhead compartments slammed open, spilling luggage into the aisles. Passengers jerked upright all at once. Not naturally. Not like people waking from sleep. They snapped up, like puppets on strings, and they all turned toward me. Every single one of them, eyes wide open, mouths stretching too wide, and smiling. smiling too much, too many teeth, too sharp. I choked back a sob. I clutched the bag to my chest, and in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I had to get to the emergency exit. I had to throw this thing out of the plane, because whatever was inside, it wasn't just alive. It was trying to be born, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Not up here. Not while I was still breathing. If I had to go down with it, so be it. The dead man's voice crawled up my spine. You don't understand. I clenched my teeth. You're right. I shoved myself up from my seat and ran for the exit. There's a kind of fear that strips you down to nothing. It isn't the fear of death. It isn't even the fear of pain. It's the fear of being unmade. The fear of knowing that something ancient and wrong is watching you. That it sees you not as a person, but as something to be used. I knew then, as I clutched the bag to my chest, as I ran for the emergency exit, that I was never meant to leave this plane alive. That this wasn't just a flight. This was a process, a ritual, and I was nothing more than cargo. The 9th hour, the air was thick with rot, not just from the dead man, not just from the thing inside the bag. The entire cabin smelled like an open grave, like something wet, and breathing had been waiting here, long before we ever boarded. I stumbled forward, my shoes sticking slightly to the carpet. I looked down. The floor was wet. Dark, oily patches of something thick and pulsing had begun leaking from beneath the seats. It wasn't just a spill. It was seeping, spreading, like the plane itself was starting to bleed. I gagged. The lights flickered, and then the whispers began. At first, I thought it was the intercom, a static hum crackling from the speakers above. But no, the sound wasn't coming from above. It was coming from inside the passengers. They were all whispering at once. Not words, not prayers. Something older, something wrong. A language that didn't belong in human mouths. I didn't have time to process it. I had to keep moving. The exit was just ahead. I just had to get there. I just had to... Squelch. I stopped. A wet slap echoed behind me, like bare feet stepping into something thick. I didn't turn around. I wouldn't. But I could feel it. Something had crawled out of the bag, and it was standing behind me. The 10th hour I ran. I don't remember making the decision. I don't even remember my feet hitting the ground. One moment, I was frozen. The next, I was sprinting down the aisle, knocking over trays, stumbling past the still smiling passengers. The exit was right there. Just a few more steps. I could see the handle. I reached for it, and everything stopped. My body locked up mid-motion, like a puppet with its strings cut, like something had grabbed me without touching me. The air turned heavy, pressing against me like wet fabric. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. And then, from directly behind me, a wet, sucking inhale. Slow, hungry, wrong. The whispers grew louder. The cabin trembled. And then, something crawled over me. I felt it. Its limbs were too long. Its joints were wrong. A slick, glistening weight pressed against my shoulders as something pressed its mouth against the back of my neck. And then, a whisper, not in my ears, inside my skull. You were supposed to be ours. The 11th hour, the thing on my back pressed closer. I could feel it wrapping around me, coiling like something boneless. It was filling the space around me, dripping down my sides, slithering into the spaces between my ribs, becoming part of me. You were supposed to stay in your seat. I choked on a silent scream. My vision darkened at the edges. This was it. I was being unmade. I was becoming part of whatever this was. And then I heard something new. A voice. A real human voice. "Sir, please take your seat." The weight on my back vanished. The whispers stopped. The air shifted back to normal. I collapsed to my knees, gasping. I looked up. A flight attendant was standing in front of me. Not the one from before. A new one. A real one. I turned, and the plane was normal. The passengers were asleep. No blackened mouths. No rotting faces. No thing standing behind me. It was like none of it had ever happened. But the bag was still there, sitting in the aisle, waiting. And then I saw something that broke me. The dead man was gone. His seat was empty, as if he had never been there at all. The final hour. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I let them escort me back to my seat. The bag was gone now. I found a live stream from a woman who never took off her wedding dress. I just figured out the horrifying reason why. Alright, so I don't normally post on Reddit, but I need to get this out. I don't even know if I'm safe right now. If something happens to me, at least you guys will know what I saw. It started 2 weeks ago. I was up late scrolling through random deep web forums. Nothing too crazy. Just your usual weird conspiracy theories, hidden YouTube videos, and some eerie abandoned website links. You know, the kind of stuff that makes you feel like you're seeing something you shouldn't. But then I found her. It was a live stream buried in a sketchy forum under a post titled, "Do not watch. If you see her, it's too late." Obviously, that just made me want to watch. The stream had been running for who knows how long, but the title was weird. Bride Forever Live 24/7. The thumbnail showed a woman sitting in a dimly lit room, wearing a full wedding dress, veil, lace, the whole thing. Her head was tilted slightly down, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The kind of pose that makes you think she's frozen in time, like a mannequin or a wax figure. I clicked on it, and that's when things got weird. The woman was just sitting there, not moving, not blinking, just staring down at something in her hands. The room was old, like an abandoned hotel room or something. Faded floral wallpaper peeled at the edges, and there was a wooden vanity mirror behind her, cracked straight down the middle. I checked the viewer count. 1. Just me. No chat. No donations. Nothing. I should have clicked off right there. But my curiosity got the best of me. I typed in the chat, "Hey, what is this?" For a while, nothing happened. The screen just stayed the same, the woman still unmoving. But then, just as I was about to leave, I noticed something. Her hands. They started trembling. It wasn't a normal shake either. It was fast, unnatural, like her fingers were glitching out, twitching in a way that no human fingers should move. Then, out of nowhere, the stream lagged. It wasn't buffering though. It was like the whole image distorted for a split second, and suddenly, she was looking directly at me, like dead into the camera. I swear on my life, she hadn't moved before. But now, her veil was slightly lifted, and I could see her eyes. They were bloodshot. I don't mean red from crying. I mean every single vein in her eyeballs was burst, like she'd been staring at something horrible for years. And then she spoke. Her voice was off, like it had been stretched and slowed down, warped and broken. "Why, did you come back? I had never been here before." I slammed my laptop shut so hard that my desk shook. My heart was pounding in my ears. The silence of my room suddenly felt oppressive, like someone was standing right behind me, breathing down my neck. I forced myself to laugh it off. It's just some creepy deep web stream, some weird horror project, or a prank, right? But then my phone buzzed. It was an email. No subject, no sender, just one sentence. You shouldn't have left her alone. I stared at it, cold sweat running down my back. I didn't reply. I didn't click anything. I just shut my phone off and sat there in silence, listening to my own heartbeat. I had no idea what I had just stumbled into, but I was about to find out, and I really wish I hadn't. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, that twisted, bloodshot stare, the way her fingers had moved, like they weren't attached to her body anymore, and that voice, broken, distorted, dragging its words through something I didn't understand. By morning, I had almost convinced myself it was just some elaborate horror ARG, some deep web creepypasta meant to mess with people. Yeah, it was weird that I got an email right after leaving, but maybe it was automated, some kind of bait to keep me engaged. I went to work, tried to push it out of my head, but the whole day felt off. People's faces looked a little too pale. The fluorescent lights in my office flickered more than usual. Even the air smelled different, like something stale and rotting was just out of reach. It got worse when I got home. I unlocked my apartment door and immediately froze. The air inside was wrong. It was freezing, way colder than when I left. And there was this smell, not just dampness, but something else, something sickly sweet, like perfume, left to rot in a closed room for years. I stepped in slowly, my stomach twisting. Nothing looked out of place. My couch was still covered in last night's blanket. My TV remote was exactly where I left it. My laptop was on my desk, its screen still black. And then I saw my bedroom door. It was wide open. I always shut it when I leave. Always. I felt my heartbeat in my throat as I reached for the light switch. The second the bulb flickered on, my stomach dropped. There was something on my bed. No, someone. A woman. Lying perfectly still on top of the blankets. A wedding dress covering her body, the fabric stained with something dark and crusted. Her veil draped over her face, obscuring it completely. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was her, the woman from the stream. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't listen. The room suddenly felt too small, like the walls were pressing in, trapping me in that space with her. Then, she moved, not like a person waking up, not like someone turning in their sleep. It was something else. Her head snapped toward me in one quick jerk-in motion. The veil shifted slightly, just enough for me to see a glimpse of her teeth. They weren't normal. They were rotting, gums pulled back so far that they looked barely human. Her lips were cracked, skin flaking like she hadn't spoken a word in years. And then she started sobbing, not crying, not weeping, sobbing. It was this horrible, wet, choking sound, like something stuck between laughing and gasping for air. It filled the entire room, bouncing off the walls, coming from everywhere at once. I staggered back, knocking over my lamp. My legs weren't working right, like the air had gotten thicker around me. I was drowning in that sound. Then she sat up, and I saw her hands, the same shaking, glitching hands from the live stream, except now they were covered in something black. Thick, tar-like liquid dripped from her fingers, staining the lace of her sleeves. The smell hit me next. Rotting flesh, damp earth, something old and decayed that made my stomach turn. Then she spoke. It's not fair. Why did you leave? Her voice was wrong, stretching and twisting in ways that made my skin crawl, like something trying to imitate human speech, but failing horribly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had locked up. She stood up in one jerky, unnatural motion, her body moving like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. And then she started walking toward me. Not fast, not slow, just steady. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran, straight out of my apartment, down the hall, out into the street. I didn't stop running until I was blocks away, my chest heaving, my heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to break free. When I finally looked back, my apartment building stood silent. No sign of her, no movement in the windows. But I knew she was still in there, and she was waiting. I called a friend, crashed on his couch for the night. Didn't explain, just said I had a break-in and needed somewhere to stay. I didn't check my phone until hours later, when I finally felt like I could breathe again. And that's when I saw it. A notification from YouTube. The live stream was still running, and the title had changed. Don't run, you're already here. My whole body went cold. I tapped it with shaking hands, the screen loading slower than usual. The stream opened. It wasn't the same room anymore. It was my apartment. The camera was set up inside my bedroom, facing my bed. The blankets were still messy from where I had run. My lamp was still on the floor, knocked over, and sitting dead center in the frame was me. Not me as I was now. Not me in my friend's apartment, panicked and sweating and gripping my phone like my life depended on it. It was a version of me that never left that room. I was sitting on the bed, completely still, hands folded in my lap. My skin looked pale, almost gray. My eyes, bloodshot. And then, slowly, my head turned toward the camera. I opened my mouth, and the screen cut to black. I sat there, gripping my phone so tightly that my fingers ached. My breath was coming in short, sharp bursts, and my vision blurred at the edges, my brain refusing to process what I had just seen. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. But there I was, sitting in my own apartment, in the same clothes I'd been wearing when I ran out, the same slouched posture I always had when I was exhausted. But that version of me, it wasn't moving, just sitting unnaturally still, hands folded like a corpse laid out for a funeral. And those eyes, they weren't looking at the camera, they were looking through it. The stream had cut to black, but I kept staring at the screen, expecting something to change. A new title, a new image, a new version of me I wasn't supposed to see. But nothing happened, just silence. A silence so heavy, it felt like it was reaching through the screen, settling on my shoulders like a thick, wet fog. Then my phone buzzed. A text message from my own number. My stomach turned to ice. I didn't want to open it. I knew I shouldn't open it, but my fingers moved on their own, trembling as I tapped the notification. You left the door open. I almost dropped my phone. I scrambled to my feet, scanning the dark living room of my friend's apartment. The door was shut. The windows were locked. Nothing was out of place. Then another text came through. Come back. Close it. No. No, no, no. I didn't reply. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Then, another buzz. But this time, it wasn't a text. It was a photo. I clicked it without thinking, and immediately, my blood turned to ice. It was my apartment door, taken from the outside. The door was open. Not just open. Wide open. The dark hallway beyond it stretched into nothingness, the kind of black void that felt wrong, like if I'd stared too long, I'd see something looking back. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I wasn't there. I hadn't gone back. But someone, something, had sent me that picture. I jumped up, grabbing my friend's arm, shaking him awake. "Dude, I need to go," I gasped. My own voice sounded off, hollow, like it was coming from somewhere else. He grunted, still half asleep. "What? What time is it?" "Doesn't matter," I said, already heading for the door. "I have to." And then my phone buzzed again. I looked down. Another text. "Turn around." I stopped breathing. Slowly, painfully slowly, I turned. The bedroom door was open. It had been closed when I got up. I was sure of it. The hallway beyond it was pitch black. And then, something moved inside the darkness. Not a normal movement. Not like someone stepping forward. It was fast. A sudden, violent jerk, like whatever was there had just been yanked backward by something I couldn't see. And then, the door slammed shut. My friend bolted upright. "What the hell was that?" I didn't answer. I was already grabbing my keys, my heart hammering so hard I thought my ribs might snap. "I have to go." "Dude, what?" I didn't wait. I ran. I don't know why I went back to my apartment. I should have gone anywhere else. But some instinct, or maybe something else, was dragging me back. When I got there, the hallway was empty. My door was still open. The air inside smelled wrong. A thick, decayed scent of roses and rot, like something had died under a pile of old wedding bouquets. I stepped inside. The floor creaked. The lights wouldn't turn on. I pulled out my phone, shining the flashlight around. My apartment looked the same, except for one thing. There was a mirror leaning against the wall. I didn't own a mirror. It was tall, antique-looking, with a thin golden frame and a surface that looked too dark, like the glass had been stained with old smoke. And then I saw the reflection. I wasn't in it, but something else was. Her, the woman in the wedding dress. She was standing behind me, just barely visible in the reflection, her veil draped over her face, her hands shaking violently at her sides. Then, her head snapped up, and she laughed, a hideous, wet gurgle of a laugh, like her throat was filled with black sludge. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The second I moved, I knew I'd feel breath on my neck. Then, in the mirror, I saw something else. My own reflection was back, but it wasn't me. It was sitting on my bed, hands folded, head tilted slightly down, still, silent, waiting. And then, it smiled. Not a normal smile, not even a human one. A slow, impossible stretching of the lips, splitting the skin at the edges, teeth too sharp pressing against the gums. The eyes, black holes, deep and endless and hungry. And then it whispered, in my own voice, "You should have stayed." I ran. I don't even remember getting back to my car. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the keys. I peeled out of the parking lot, heart slamming against my ribs, my brain screaming at me that I had seen something I was never meant to see. I looked in my rearview mirror. The reflection wasn't mine. It was still smiling. I don't know how I made it through the night. I drove without thinking, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. My reflection in the rearview mirror never stopped smiling, never blinking, just sitting there like a parasite stitched into the glass, wearing my face like a borrowed mask. I didn't look at it. Couldn't. Every time my gaze accidentally flicked toward the mirror, I felt it. The wrongness. That thing wasn't just mimicking me. It was watching me, studying the way I breathed, the way my fingers trembled, the way my pulse pounded in my neck. Waiting. I pulled into an empty parking lot, some 24-hour gas station just off the highway. The buzzing neon sign overhead flickered, humming like it was trying to tell me something I couldn't understand. The whole place felt too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I put the car in park. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I needed to breathe, to get a grip on reality, to stop myself from spiraling into the kind of fear that eats people alive. But then my phone buzzed, and I knew before I even looked. It was another photo. My hand trembled as I unlocked the screen. It was a picture of me, not in my car, not even in my apartment. It was me, standing in my childhood bedroom. The bed was still covered in the same Batman sheets I had when I was 10. My old bookshelf leaned in the corner, filled with comics and broken action figures. The wallpaper, blue with tiny white stars, was peeling at the edges like it had been rotten for years, and I was just standing there, facing the camera, staring, eyes bloodshot, hands twitching at my sides. Then, another photo, closer. The figure in the image, me, but not me, was grinning now, teeth bare, lips cracked. The edges of my mouth stretched too wide, like the skin had started to tear at the corners. Then another photo, closer, and this time, its head was tilting, not slowly, not naturally, snapping sideways, like someone had grabbed the back of its skull and just twisted. I dropped my phone. A fresh wave of dizziness slammed into me. My stomach lurched, something heavy and wrong pressing behind my ribs, like my body was rejecting the air itself. And then, a tap on my window. My whole body seized. I turned my head, heart slamming against my ribs so hard I thought I was dying. There was a man standing outside my car. At least, I think it was a man. His face was too smooth, skin stretched too tightly over bone, like his skull was shaped wrong underneath. His eyes were too large, too wet, and too deep set, like someone had pushed them into his skull and forgotten where they belonged. And his smile, God, his smile. It was the same one from the pictures. My smile. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He leaned in closer, his lips parted, revealing teeth that weren't human, jagged and uneven, yellowed and cracked like something that had never stopped chewing. Then he spoke, but his mouth didn't move. The words just arrived, pouring into my brain like a radio signal from somewhere deep and endless and rotting. Let me in. I nearly threw up. His hand pressed against the window. His fingers weren't fingers anymore. They were bones. Long yellowed bones, wrapped in something thin and gray. Skin stretched too tightly over cartilage that didn't belong to a human hand. He tapped again. Software. Polite. Let me in. I slammed my foot on the gas. My tires screeched against the pavement, the car jerking forward so fast I nearly lost control. My vision blurred, my brain screaming at me to run, run, run. I didn't look back, didn't check the mirrors, didn't stop, didn't breathe, just drove. I don't know how far I went before I finally pulled over, chest heaving, fingers still locked in a death grip around the wheel. The world outside the car was silent. The empty road stretched behind me like an open wound, disappearing into the kind of darkness that didn't feel natural. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look. I knew, but I looked. A new message. You left something behind. Then before I could even breathe, another one. A photo. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Slowly, so painfully slowly, I opened the image. My apartment, the bedroom, the mirror. But this time, The thing inside it was gone. The glass was empty, like something had stepped out. And then, one last message. I'm almost home. The air collapsed around me. I dropped my phone. It hit the floor of the car with a dull, dead sound. And in the reflection of the driver's side window, something smiled back. I wasn't alone in the car. I knew it the second I saw the reflection. It was in the window, watching me, smiling that same broken, too wide smile. Its skin didn't quite fit. Its teeth looked like they had been jammed into its gums by something that didn't understand how a human mouth worked. And its eyes were mine. But they weren't blinking. I didn't turn, didn't move. The air in the car had gone thick, the kind of suffocating heat that pressed against my skull, stuffed itself down my throat, squeezed around my lungs like wet fingers. I could hear something breathing, but it wasn't coming from my mouth. It was coming from the seat behind me. I kept my eyes forward, hands tight on the wheel. I needed to think. I needed to move. I needed to. You're in the wrong skin. The words crawled into my ear like a worm burrowing through bone. I could feel them inside me, like something had whispered straight into my nerves instead of my ears. I opened my mouth, but my voice didn't come out. Instead, I heard a laugh. Not mine, not human. Low, wet, guttural, like someone drowning while smiling. And then, I felt fingers slide over my shoulder. Slow, deliberate. They weren't warm. They weren't cold. They just felt wrong. I ripped the door open and threw myself out of the car. The pavement bit into my hands, gravel slicing deep into my palms. My knees buckled, body crashing onto the concrete. But I didn't stop. I scrambled up, legs trembling, eyes wide and burning with tears. I didn't remember crying. The car door was still open. The inside of the car was empty, but the rearview mirror was shaking, not from the wind, not from my movement. It was shaking like something was trying to get out. The glass twisted, warped, bulged like a lung inflating with something that shouldn't be breathing. I turned and ran. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes? Hours? My legs were numb. My chest felt like it was splitting apart, my breath coming in ragged, uneven gasps. But I didn't stop. I ran through empty streets, past dark houses that felt abandoned but not empty. I ran until my vision blurred, until the buildings around me looked wrong, like they were shifting when I wasn't looking. Then, finally, a gas station. A real one. Bright. Alive. The neon lights didn't flicker. I stumbled inside, hands still slick with something that wasn't sweat, and nearly collapsed against the counter. The cashier, a normal guy, real, breathing, blinking, looked up, startled. Jesus, dude, are you okay? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Just breathe. Shaking, wet breath. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling, pulled up the camera. I had to see. I turned it to selfie mode, and my stomach collapsed in on itself. It was me, but it wasn't. My face looked off, the skin slightly too tight, my lips cracked too deeply at the edges, my teeth looking too straight, too solid, too planted in my gums like they didn't belong there. And my eyes, they weren't blinking. I stared. My reflection stared back. And then, it moved. Not me. The thing wearing my skin. Its head tilted, that same unnatural bone-snapping movement I had seen before. Its lips twitched, almost like it was trying to remember how to use them. And then it smiled, a slow, creeping stretch of the mouth. Too wide, too unnatural. And then, it blinked. I didn't. It blinked, and I finally understood. The thing in the mirror wasn't trapped anymore. I was. I was the reflection. I was the thing in the glass. I looked at my hands. They weren't mine anymore. The skin felt thicker, heavier, like it was wearing me instead of me wearing it. I gasped, but the thing in the phone didn't. It just stood there, smiling, breathing, blinking. The cashier was still talking. He was talking to it. Not me. Not me. And then it did the worst thing of all. It turned, and it walked away. Out of the gas station, out into the world, into my life. I slammed my fist against the glass of my phone screen, screaming, screaming, screaming. But the camera just showed the store behind me. Because I wasn't there. Because I wasn't real anymore. I was just a reflection, a ghost in the glass. And I'm still here. I don't know where it went. I don't know what it's doing. But if you see me, if you meet me, if I text you, if I show up at your door, it's not me. Please, God, don't let it in. Because once it's inside, it never leaves. Never. My son's been collecting chicken teeth from the dark web. I just wish I knew what they really were before it was too late. Alright, so I don't even know where to start with this. I guess I should say that I'm not some crazy conspiracy guy, and I don't normally believe in horror story BS. I work a normal job, manager at a best, buy if you must know. I live in a normal suburb outside of Chicago, and I've got a normal 12-year-old son named Tyler, who spends way too much time online. Tyler's always been into weird stuff. He watches those animated horror stories on YouTube, follows all those mystery box unboxing videos, and gets obsessed with creepy internet rabbit holes. I figured it was just normal middle school edginess, until he started talking about chicken teeth. Now, I don't know if you know this, but chickens don't have teeth. That's literally a thing, right? Like, people say rarer than hen's teeth, because they don't exist. So when Tyler told me he was collecting chicken teeth from a guy on the deep web, I laughed. Thought it was just some weird internet joke. But then the packages started coming. At first, I didn't even notice. Tyler gets little Amazon packages all the time. Cheap gaming accessories, Funko Pops, whatever. But these were different. No labels, no return address. Just small brown boxes, sealed with thick black tape, always arriving late at night. One night, I caught him sneaking one into his room. It was around 2 a.m., and I'd gotten up to grab some water. When I saw him tiptoeing down the hallway with that little box, I called out, "Hey, what the hell is that?" He froze, then turned around real slow. "Just a thing I ordered." I squinted at the box in his hands. "From who?" He mumbled something, but I caught one word: Tor. Now, I'm not some tech whiz, but I know enough to recognize that. The Tor browser, the thing people use to access the dark web. That's when I got a bad feeling. The next day, when Tyler left for school, I went into his room. I wasn't trying to snoop. Okay, maybe a little, but I just had to see what was inside those packages. I found them tucked away in his closet, hidden behind some old Nerf guns. There were 6 of them, all neatly stacked. I opened one. Inside was a tiny glass vial, no bigger than my thumb, filled with what looked like tiny yellowed teeth. Some were sharp, others flat, but all of them were old and brittle looking, like they'd been pulled from a corpse. I felt sick. I opened another box. More vials. Some had dried blood on them. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe plastic props, fake Halloween decorations, but these were real. That's when I heard the front door open. Tyler was home early. I barely had time to shove everything back before he walked in. When he saw me standing in his room, his face drained of color. "Dad," his voice was barely above a whisper. "What are you doing?" I tried to play it cool. "I should be asking you that, dude. What the hell are these?" His eyes flicked to the closet. He hesitated, just for a second, before mumbling, "Chicken teeth." I held up the vial. "Tyler, chickens don't have teeth." He swallowed hard. His hands were shaking. Then he whispered, "I know." I stared at my son. He stared back, his face pale, lips pressed tight, like he was afraid to open his mouth. Like if he did, he might say something he wasn't supposed to. I took a deep breath, gripping the vial in my hand. The tiny teeth rattled inside, making a soft clicking sound that sent a chill down my spine. "Tyler," I kept my voice calm. "Where did you get these?" He hesitated. I could see the gears turning in his head, deciding whether to lie. Then finally, he exhaled. "From a guy named Rooster." That name made my skin crawl, and I didn't even know why. "Rooster?" I repeated. "Who the hell is Rooster?" Tyler swallowed. His hands twitched at his sides like he wanted to snatch the vial from me, but knew better. "He sells stuff on a forum. You have to get invited." "Stuff?" Tyler glanced toward the closet. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Teeth." I felt my stomach knot. "What kind of teeth?" His lips parted slightly. His breath was shallow, like he was remembering something. Then he said, in a voice that barely sounded like him, "Not chicken teeth." I don't know why that sent ice through my veins, but it did. I turned back to the closet, yanked out another box, and tore it open. Another vial, then another, then another. Dozens of them, some filled to the brim, others nearly empty. The glass was cloudy, with something dark smeared on the inside. Some kind of dried residue. Blood? I stared at my son, waiting for him to explain, but he just stood there, frozen, like a statue. That's when I noticed something. The teeth weren't all the same. Some were too big. Some had roots still attached. Some looked like they came from something that had bit down too hard before they were yanked out. A sick thought formed in my head. I picked up one of the vials and uncapped it. Instantly, a smell hit me. It wasn't rotten. Not exactly. It was more like something burnt, mixed with meat. Like a butcher shop at closing time. Like animal fat left on a hot grill. I recoiled, nearly dropping the vial. "Jesus Christ, Tyler," I muttered. "What the hell is this?" He didn't answer. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. That's when I heard it. A sound. So faint, I almost thought I imagined it. A tiny, sharp clicking noise, coming from the vial, like the sound of tiny bones tapping together, like chattering. My heart started pounding. What the hell is that? Tyler's breathing got shaky. His whole body was tense, shoulders hunched up to his ears. "Dad," he whispered, "you shouldn't open them." I looked at the vial in my hand, watching the teeth shift slightly, like something inside had moved. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I slammed the vial back into the box, sealing it shut. My hands were shaking. "You're done with this," I said. "No more weird-ass packages. No more deep web. You hear me?" Tyler looked up at me. Then, and the expression on his face made my blood turn to ice. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something worse. Regret. Like he knew something I didn't. Like it was already too late. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing things. Faint clicking sounds from Tyler's room. like something moving inside the boxes. Once, I could have sworn I heard scratching. At around 3 a.m., I finally got up. I had to check. I crept down the hall, heart pounding. Tyler's door was slightly open, and I peeked inside. He was awake, sitting cross-legged on his bed, holding a vial in his hands. The cap was off, and the teeth were moving. I sucked in a breath, and that's when one of them crawled onto his palm. I barely held back a scream. It was small, but it had legs. Thin, pale, little spindly things, like a spider. It moved in quick, jerky motions, skittering across his skin. Another one followed, then another. Tyler just watched, his mouth slightly open, his pupils huge. I lunged into the room, knocking the vial from his hands. It hit the floor and shattered. The tiny, crawling things scattered into the shadows. Tyler gasped, eyes snapping toward me. "Dad! Why did you do that?" I grabbed him by the shoulders. What the hell was that? His eyes were wild. His breath was ragged. Then his lips split into a grin. "They're hungry," he whispered. I pushed him back onto the bed, my pulse thundering in my ears. I had to get rid of them. I had to burn those boxes. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. His teeth. They weren't his anymore. They were sharper, smaller, moving slightly, like they were adjusting to fit inside his mouth. And when he laughed, they clicked together, like chattering bone, just like the sound I'd heard from the vials. I backed away, my stomach twisting in horror. "What did you do?" Tyler tilted his head, smiled too wide. "Rooster says the first batch takes a while to settle," he murmured. "But once they're in, they never stop growing." I ran out of the room. I locked myself in my bedroom, my mind racing. What the hell had my son gotten into? What the hell had I just seen? I needed to stop this. I needed to find Rooster, and I needed to find out what the hell my son was turning into. I didn't sleep. I sat in my locked bedroom, heart pounding, hands trembling, mind racing in 100 directions at once. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, those tiny, skittering things crawling over Tyler's skin, burrowing into the shadows, their brittle little legs tapping against the floor. But worst of all, I saw his smile, his teeth clicking together, rearranging themselves like they were alive. I had to stop this. I had to find Rooster. I wasn't some dark web expert, but I knew how to use a damn computer. I yanked my laptop open and typed "how to access Tor browser" into Google. It didn't take long. Download this, change these settings, use a VPN, don't be an idiot. 10 minutes later, I was inside. The dark web isn't some big horror movie underground where you instantly see red rooms and hitmen for hire. It's mostly just forums, hidden marketplaces, illegal crap floating around in the cracks of the internet. I didn't know where to start, so I searched for one word: teeth. At first, nothing. A few creepy medical supply sites, some sketchy taxidermy pages, but then, buried in a long thread about strange biological oddities, I found a single link: chickens laughing. It didn't make sense. It wasn't a forum name or a shop, just those words. I clicked it. The page was black. No header, no logo, just a single question in white text. Did you hear them laugh? My mouth went dry. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A tiny cursor blinked beneath the text, waiting for an answer. I typed, "Yes." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the screen flickered. A new line of text appeared. "Who sent you?" I hesitated. My mind raced. If I said Tyler, would that put him in danger? If I said no one, would they shut me out? I typed, Rooster! The screen went black. Then a low, distorted sound crackled through my speakers. A noise I will never forget. It was laughter, but not human. It was a twisted, wet, animalistic cackle, layered with a static buzz, like a broken radio, trying to imitate human joy. My stomach turned. Then the page changed again. A new message appeared, along with a video file. He's waiting. Don't keep him hungry. File, Rooster, livefeed.mp4. I didn't want to open it. Every nerve in my body screamed, don't. But my son had been feeding something that wasn't chicken teeth, something that was growing inside him, and I needed to know what. So I clicked. The video was grainy, bad night vision, flickering greenish static. At first, I thought it was just an empty warehouse. Then, something moved. A figure, hunched over, spindly and wrong, crouched in the center of the frame. At first, I thought it was a man, but the way it twitched made my skin crawl. It had long, thin arms, folded in a way that no human joints should allow. But the worst part, its face. It had no lips, just teeth. Rows and rows of jagged, yellowing, clicking teeth, moving independently, chattering together like a million tiny bones snapping. It tilted its head, like it could see me through the screen. Then it spoke. Its voice was wrong, layered, like two people talking at once, one deep and gurgling, the other high and shrill. Come closer. I slammed my laptop shut. For a long time, I just sat there, my pulse pounding in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. But one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't a game. And whatever my son had gotten into, Rooster wasn't done with him yet. I stormed into Tyler's room, yanking the door open so hard it banged against the wall. He was waiting for me, sitting cross-legged on his bed, staring at the doorway like he knew I was coming. You talked to him, didn't you? His voice was calm. Too calm. I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. Tyler, I need you to tell me the truth. Right now. He blinked slowly. You saw him, didn't you? My throat went dry. I took a step closer. How long have you been talking to Rooster? Tyler just smiled. His teeth shifted again, clicking softly, rearranging. I didn't find him, he whispered. He found me. I felt a deep, horrible dread settle in my stomach. What does he want? I asked. Tyler tilted his head. His pupils were huge, swallowing almost all of the color in his irises. They need to eat, he whispered. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I took another step toward him, voice low and firm. Tyler, what the hell did you bring into this house? His lips curled back, exposing more of those twitching, chattering teeth. You'll see, he murmured. And then I heard it, a soft clicking sound coming from the closet. It started faint, a gentle tapping, like fingernails against wood. Then it grew, faster, louder, a chorus of tiny bones rattling. The closet door shuddered. Something inside scraped against it. My breath caught in my throat. Tyler grinned. They're still hungry, he whispered. And then the closet burst open. The closet exploded open, not like a door swinging wide. I mean burst open, like something inside had been pushing, clawing, gnawing at the wood from the inside, waiting for the exact second to be set loose. And now it was. The room went ice cold. And the smell. I've smelled death before. I worked at a grocery store in high school, and once, a freezer in the back broke over a long weekend. Meat sat in it for 3 days, rotting in the summer heat. The smell was so thick you could taste it. Sour, putrid, thick with decay. But this was worse. It smelled wrong. Like something had died, but not all the way. Like something that was still moving, still breathing, still trying to be alive when it wasn't supposed to be. And then I saw them. At first, I thought they were rats. They were small, scurrying, bone-colored things that darted from the darkness of the closet, skittering across the floor with sickening speed. But they weren't rats. They had teeth. That's all they were. Clusters of human teeth, fused together, clicking and chattering as they scuttled forward on thin, pale tendrils of flesh, like the nerve endings had stretched and learned how to crawl. One of them jerked its head toward me, or what I thought was a head. A nest of molars twisted into a jagged grin, chattering, so fast it blurred. Then they leaped. I jumped back just in time. One of them landed where my foot had been with a sickening crunch, its tiny jaws snapping at the air. I grabbed the closest thing, a lamp, and swung. The base smashed into one of the things, sending it skidding across the floor. But the others kept coming. Tyler just watched. His face was blank, detached, like he was watching a nature documentary instead of his own father fighting for his life. "Tyler!" I shouted, backing up, knocking over his nightstand. "What the hell is this? What did you bring here?" His expression never changed. "They need to eat," he whispered again. Something cold and sharp clamped down on my ankle. I screamed. I kicked wildly, feeling rows of tiny teeth sink into my skin, tearing, ripping, trying to burrow in. My foot connected with something solid. I heard a crack, and the thing let go, skidding across the floor, chattering madly. Blood dripped down my leg, soaking into my sock. I ran. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me, my hands slick with sweat and blood. I could still hear them, those clicking, chattering sounds, the scraping of tiny bone feet on the wood floor, Tyler's slow, steady breathing behind it all. I grabbed the heaviest chair I could find and jammed it under the doorknob. For a moment, silence. Then, thump, scratch, scratch, scratch. Something was crawling at the door, pushing against it, testing it. Then, a sound that made my skin crawl. A dozen tiny voices whispering in perfect unison from the other side of the door. "Let us in. We're still hungry." I ran. I grabbed my keys, my phone, didn't even put on shoes. I stumbled out the front door, my vision swimming from the blood loss, the pain burning up my leg. I needed help. I needed to get my son out of there. But who the hell do you call for something like this? I couldn't tell the cops. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, my kid is feeding demon teeth from the dark web, and now they're alive and trying to eat me." I only knew one name. Rooster. I didn't care how dangerous he was. I didn't care what the hell he wanted. I just knew he had the answers, and I was going to find him. I drove like a maniac. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep them on the wheel. I had no plan. Just a name. Just a ghost from the internet. But I had one lead. The live feed. The video I had closed too fast. Too scared to watch. I yanked my phone from my pocket and reopened the link. The screen flickered. Static. Darkness. And then, the same warehouse. That same twisted figure, crouched in the center. I turned up the volume. A wet, gurgling sound filled my car. Then, "You're late." My breath caught in my throat. It was talking to me. I swallowed hard, my hands white-knuckling the wheel. "Where are you?" I asked. The figure tilted its head. Its teeth clattered together. Close. I didn't have time for this. I glanced at the signs on the road, trying to figure out where the hell I was. I was halfway to downtown Chicago, passing dimly lit industrial parks, rows of abandoned warehouses, factories with broken windows like jagged teeth. And then I saw it, an old graffiti-covered building with a single light on inside, and a shadow in the window, staring out at the street, waiting. My stomach dropped. I pulled into the lot. The place looked abandoned as hell. Broken glass, rusted doors, the kind of place people go to disappear. I parked, turned off the engine, sat there, my hands shaking, watching the dark figure in the window. Then, my phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. Come inside. They're getting impatient. I looked up. The shadow in the window was gone. My blood turned to ice. I had a choice. Turn around. Drive away. Forget all of this. Or go inside. And finally, meet Rooster. I stepped out of the car. The air was thick, damp, with the stink of rotting meat, and something sour, like a slaughterhouse, left to fester. The pavement beneath my feet was sticky. My first thought was oil, but when I crouched down and touched it, my fingers came away red. Not fresh blood. Old. Dark. Seeped into the cracks, like it had been there for years. I took a shaky breath and walked forward. The warehouse door was cracked open, just enough to let me in. They were waiting for me. Inside, it was worse. The walls were covered in hanging chains, rusted and damp with something thick. The air buzzed. Flies, thousands of them, moving in thick clouds around the piles of meat scattered across the floor. Not just meat. Bodies. I nearly vomited. They weren't human. At least, not entirely. Some looked like chickens, but their heads were wrong, twisted into human-like faces with rows of teeth where beaks should have been. Others were bigger, their limbs too long, their skin pale and pulsing, their mouths splitting open into wide, unnatural grins. The teeth, the same teeth I had seen in the vials, the same ones I had seen crawling on my son. This was where they came from. This was the hatchery. And then I heard it. A voice, low, wet, slurred like something trying to speak with too many tongues at once. You're late. My stomach tightened. The voice was coming from above. I looked up, and I saw him. Rooster. He was hanging from the rafters, suspended by ropes of flesh that pulsed and twitched like veins. His arms stretched too long, his fingers curled into bony claws. His face was gone. Just a gaping hole where his mouth should have been, filled with layer upon layer of clicking teeth, grinding together, spitting flecks of bone dust into the air. And he was smiling, not with lips. He didn't have those, just teeth shifting beneath his skin, stretching into a grin too wide, too impossible, stretching all the way down his throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Do you understand now? He gurgled. Do you see? I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But then, something moved behind me, skittering, chattering. I turned just in time to see them emerging from the darkness. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The teeth things. But now they weren't small anymore. They had grown. Their bodies were longer, their legs thicker, stronger. Their jaws were bigger, lined with fresh, glistening rows of human teeth, snapping, clicking, hungry. And they were getting closer. Your son fed them well, Rooster gurgled. He made them strong. I snapped. I grabbed the closest rusted chain and ripped it free from the ceiling, swinging it like a whip, sending a spray of rust and gore into the air. One of the teeth creatures lunged at me. I brought the chain down hard, feeling it crunch beneath the weight. The thing let out a horrible, warbling shriek, like a pig being slaughtered, before it split open down the middle, spewing blackened marrow across the floor. The others hesitated. I ran. I bolted towards the back of the warehouse, heart hammering, feet pounding through pools of rotting blood. I could hear them behind me, their claws scraping, their jaws snapping, moving faster than anything should move. Rooster's laughter echoed overhead. "They won't let you leave." Then I saw it. A door, rusted and half-hidden, behind a collapsed pile of bones. I didn't think. I just ran for it, slamming my entire weight against it, bursting through into the cold night air. I hit the ground hard, rolling onto the gravel, gasping. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, a thud. I turned my head just in time to see something big and pale smash against the door from the other side. It was trying to break through. I staggered to my feet, heart hammering, and ran for my car. The warehouse door behind me shuddered. I could hear them, chittering, clicking, laughing. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I jumped into my car, slammed the door shut, and peeled out of the lot so fast my tires screeched against the pavement. And then I was gone. I don't remember driving home. I barely remember stumbling into the house, locking every door, shoving a chair under the doorknob, just in case. All I remember is Tyler's room. It was silent. The door was still blocked with the chair. I didn't know if he was still alive. I didn't know if I wanted him to be. I thought about burning the house down, thought about packing a bag and leaving forever. But then I thought about what Rooster said. Your son fed them well. Fed them, not just the ones in the warehouse, the ones still inside him. I reached out and slowly turned the doorknob. I don't know how to explain what I saw inside that room, not in a way that makes sense. The walls were covered in teeth, rows and rows of human teeth, embedded in the wallpaper, grinding together, shifting like tiny, twitching fingers. And in the center of the room was Tyler. He was standing there, eyes wide and black, his mouth stretched into a grin so wide his cheeks had split open, leaking thick, red saliva down his chin. And his teeth. They weren't his anymore. They were growing, expanding, pushing out of his gums in long, jagged spires, crawling down his throat, lining the inside of his lips, clicking together in a chorus of chattering hunger. His tongue darted out, licked across the rows of shifting fangs. Then he laughed, the same wet, gurgling cackle I had heard in the warehouse and in Rooster's video. His voice came out in a wet, gurgling whisper. "Dad, they're still hungry. This account has been deleted." I played a text-based adventure game on the dark web. I can't undo the things I did. Alright, so before I even get into this, I just want to say, yeah, I know, I was an idiot. I should have never even gone near the dark web, let alone played some sketchy text-based game that I found there. But at the time, it seemed harmless. I mean, I wasn't trying to buy anything illegal. No hitmen, no stolen credit cards, nothing like that. Just some dumb internet rabbit hole I fell into out of boredom. It started one night, a couple of months ago. I was in my room, scrolling through Reddit like I always do, and I came across a post on r/deep web mysteries. Some guy was talking about old, abandoned websites that you can only access through Tor. People were sharing links to weird forums, creepy old GeoCities pages, and all this other random junk. Most of it was harmless, stuff from the early 2000s, back when the internet still had that weird, Wild West vibe. Then I saw a comment that stood out. It just said, If you really want something disturbing, play the King's Game. But don't say I didn't warn you. The user who posted it had one of those generic throwaway accounts, and when I clicked on it, the account was deleted. Classic dark web bait, right? But the name stuck with me. The King's Game. Sounded like some weird medieval RPG or something. So, like an idiot, I started looking for it. Finding the game. I downloaded Tor and started digging through old hidden service directories, looking for anything that mentioned it. It took hours, but eventually I found this site with a black background and nothing but a single line of red text in the middle of the screen. The king awaits. Below that, there was a button labeled Enter. Now, at this point, most people would have noped the hell out of there. But I was curious. I figured it was some RRG or creepy text-based adventure like Zork, just with a dark twist. So I clicked Enter. The screen went black, and then white text started appearing, like an old-school DOS game. It just said, Welcome, subject. Do you wish to play? There were two options, YN. I typed Y, and the game began. The first choice. At first, it really did seem like an old-school text adventure. The game described a dark, empty kingdom ruled by the king. It told me that I was his newest subject, and my choices would determine my fate. I thought it was kinda cool. Super atmospheric, like something from a horror podcast. Then I got my first prompt. The king is hungry. Choose a sacrifice. There were three options. A beggar, a prisoner, a child. Now, obviously, I wasn't about to pick the child. I figured the prisoner was the safest bet. It's just a game, right? So I typed 2. The screen flickered. Then new text appeared. The king accepts your offering, but he grows restless. Then the screen went black, and my webcam light blinked on. I freaked out and slammed my laptop shut. Something's watching me. For a solid minute, I just sat there, staring at my laptop like it was about to explode. The game couldn't actually access my webcam. Right. I decided to unplug it just in case. After a few minutes, my curiosity got the best of me, and I opened my laptop again. The game was still running, and a new prompt had appeared. Do not leave the game. My stomach dropped. I moved my mouse to close the window, but another message popped up instantly. The king does not forgive. That's when my phone buzzed. I looked down, and there was a notification from an unknown number. It just said, "Why did you kill me?" I swear to God, my entire body went cold. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to do. I typed back, "Who is this?" Almost immediately, I got a reply. You chose me. You chose to sacrifice me. At that point, I was straight up terrified. My hands were shaking. It was just a game, right? There was no way this was real. Then another message came through. It was a picture of me, sitting at my desk. From the webcam, I had just unplugged. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at my phone. My fingers were ice cold, gripping the edges so tight my knuckles turned white. I didn't want to look at the picture, but I couldn't stop myself. It was taken from my webcam, the one I had physically unplugged, and it was recent. In the photo, I was hunched over my laptop, my eyes locked on the screen, but something was off. I zoomed in, my breathing shallow. There was a shadow behind me. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but the more I looked, the more I saw it. It wasn't just a shadow. It was something standing behind me, just outside the reach of my desk lamp. Its outline was human, but its head was wrong, stretched, elongated, like something had pulled its face forward. I turned around so fast, I nearly fell out of my chair. Nothing. My room was empty. The door was still locked. The only thing behind me was my bed, messy and unmade like always. I checked my closet. Empty. I checked under the bed. Nothing. I checked every goddamn corner of my room, but there was nowhere for someone or something to hide. But the air felt different, heavy, charged, like someone was still in there with me. Do not leave the game. The words were still on my laptop screen, the text waiting, blinking. I swallowed, my throat dry. Every instinct in my body was telling me to shut the laptop, throw it out the window, burn it if I had to. But my hands weren't listening. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I had to respond. I typed, "Who are you?" The screen stayed black for a long time. Then the text started appearing, one slow letter at a time. I am the king's will. I am the eyes behind your eyes, and I am hungry. My stomach twisted. I tried to close the window, but another line of text appeared before I could move. You will choose, again, a new prompt. Choose a sacrifice, a stranger, a loved one, yourself. I stared at the options, my heart hammering in my chest. This was different from before. The first time, it was all in the game, just text on a screen. But now it was personal. I wanted to choose myself. I wanted to type 3 and end whatever nightmare this was. But something deep inside me, something primal, knew that it wouldn't work. That whatever this thing was, it wasn't going to let me go that easily. And then my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. This time, it wasn't just a message. It was a live location. I clicked it without thinking. Google Maps opened, and the little blue dot showed a place 4 miles away from me. A McDonald's, the one on the corner of 5th and Lexington. My stomach lurched. I knew that place. I'd been there a million times before. It was open 24/7, always filled with teenagers and drunk college kids. It was the kind of place where people came and went, where no one really paid attention to anything. And then another message came through. There. Go there. You have 1 hour. A cold sweat broke out across my skin. I looked back at the screen. The game was still waiting for my choice. But suddenly, I knew. This wasn't a game. It had never been a game. Whatever I had chosen in that first round, whatever prisoner I had sacrificed, it had been real. And now, it wanted another. The McDonald's. I don't know why I went. I should have run. I should have thrown my laptop in the river and smashed my phone into a million pieces. But I didn't. I grabbed my hoodie, shoved my phone into my pocket, and left. The walk to McDonald's was cold and quiet. The city felt wrong. I live in a busy part of town, but the streets were weirdly empty. No cars, no people, just silence, like the whole world was holding its breath. When I got to the McDonald's, everything looked normal. Bright fluorescent lights, the smell of fries and grease, a few people sitting at tables. It almost made me feel stupid, like maybe I was overreacting. Then I saw him. There was a man sitting alone in the corner, mid-40s, unshaven, wearing a dirty green jacket. He looked tired, not just physically. Something in his face, in his posture, looked completely drained, like he'd already given up on life. And then, as if he could feel me watching him, he lifted his head. Our eyes met, and my phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket with shaking hands. Him. Do it! I looked back at the man. He was still staring at me, but now his expression had changed. His lips parted slightly, like he was about to say something, but he didn't. Instead, he just shook his head, like he knew what I was here for. I turned away so fast I almost tripped over my own feet. My heart was slamming against my ribs. I walked straight past the register, past the other customers, straight to the restroom. I needed a minute, just a minute to breathe, to think. I locked myself in a stall, sat on the toilet seat, and stared at my phone. My fingers were shaking as I typed. Number, I'm not doing this. Leave me alone. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, you already did it. And then, I heard a scream. A loud, sharp, wet scream, cutting through the noise of the restaurant. I stumbled out of the stall, my legs barely working. When I pushed open the bathroom door, everyone was screaming. The man in the green jacket was on the floor, his body twitching. His throat was open, split clean from one side to the other. Blood was pooling under the table, spilling out across the floor like someone had knocked over a soda. People were running. Someone was shouting for help. And then, as I stood there, frozen, my phone buzzed one last time. The king accepts your sacrifice. I dropped my phone, and in the reflection of the bathroom mirror, just behind me, I saw a shape, tall, stretched, watching, and it smiled. I don't know how I got home. 1 second, I was standing in that blood-soaked McDonald's, my ears ringing with the sound of screaming. The next, I was back in my apartment, sitting on my bed, my hands still shaking. I couldn't remember walking home. I couldn't remember unlocking my door, but I did remember one thing. The face in the mirror, that twisted, stretched thing standing behind me, watching, smiling. And the worst part, it was still here. I could feel it. The silent room. My apartment felt wrong, not like someone had broken in. There were no signs of a struggle, no doors or windows left open, but the air felt heavy, thick, like something invisible was pressing down on me, like the space itself had changed. I tried to tell myself I was just paranoid, that I was in shock, that it was all just some kind of horrific coincidence. But then, I noticed my laptop. It was open. I hadn't opened it. I knew I hadn't opened it. But there it was, sitting on my desk, the screen glowing in the dark, and the king's game was still running. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff and numb. The text on the screen was different now. It just said, "Do not lie to me." And then, another message. "The king knows what you have done." I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as sandpaper. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant, but I had to type something. I wrote, "I didn't do anything." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, the screen flickered, and new text appeared. "Lies have consequences. The king will make you remember." And then, my lights went out. The king makes me remember. Darkness swallowed the room. I heard a noise behind me. Something quiet. Something breathing. I turned around, my heart pounding so hard I thought my ribs might crack. But there was nothing there. Just darkness. Then, a whisper. Low, almost playful, like someone murmuring just behind my ear. "Look." The laptop screen changed. Instead of text, it showed a video. A grainy black and white security feed. The timestamp in the corner read 11:47 p.m., the exact time I had been at McDonald's. I recognized the place immediately. The same fluorescent lights, the same greasy tiled floor, the same booths, and the same man in the green jacket. He was sitting alone at his table, eating his food, just like before. But then, something moved behind him. I squinted, leaning closer. It was me. I was standing behind him, just standing there, watching, but that didn't make any sense. I hadn't been anywhere near him. I had gone to the bathroom. I had locked myself in the stall. Right? I watched as the version of me on the screen stepped closer. The man must have felt me behind him because he looked up, his face confused. He opened his mouth to say something, and then I grabbed him. I didn't just grab him. I moved too fast, too unnatural, like something was pulling the strings inside my body. My hands latched onto his head, twisting so hard and so fast that his neck snapped like a dry branch. I flinched. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't possible. That wasn't me. But it was. And the video kept going. The thing wearing my body let go of the man's corpse, letting it slump forward onto the table. Blood dripped from his nose and mouth, pooling onto his tray, soaking into his fries. And then the camera flickered, and I turned to face it. My head snapped toward the lens so fast that my neck should have broken too. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was my face. Or rather, the lack of it. In the grainy black and white footage, my skin looked stretched, pulled into something else, something blank and featureless, like a mask made of human flesh, like something had peeled me empty. And then the screen went black. The king does not forgive. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the blank screen. My whole body felt numb, my mind an empty void of static. Then, new text appeared. The king has chosen you. You cannot escape. You cannot run. You will serve. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I barely breathed. And then, the final message appeared. Look behind you. My whole body locked up. Number. No, I would not. But then I heard it. The slow, deep sound of breathing. Right. Behind. Me. I felt something press against my back. Light, like the touch of a finger. My skin crawled, my stomach twisting into knots. I turned around, and it was there. The thing from the mirror. The king's will. It was taller than a person should be. Its limbs too long. Its neck bent at an unnatural angle, like it didn't quite understand how to wear a human shape. Its face was blank, smooth, featureless, except for its mouth. Its mouth was stretched too wide, too many teeth, too many smiles. And worst of all, it was wearing my face. Not just a copy, not a reflection. My actual face. My skin was stretched across its head, stitched at the edges with something black and oozing. The lips moved, but the expression wasn't mine. The smile was too big, too sharp, too knowing. And then, in a voice that was almost mine, it spoke. You chose wrong. Then, everything went black. I'm not alone. Anymore. I woke up in my bed. The morning light streamed through my blinds like nothing had happened. Birds chirped outside. The city buzzed as usual. But I knew it wasn't over, because when I got up, when I looked in the mirror, I saw something standing behind me, just out of focus, just at the edge of sight, and it was wearing my skin. I stopped sleeping after that night, not because I didn't want to, because I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I was somewhere else, somewhere dark, somewhere ancient. The air was thick with rot and decay, the ground wet beneath my bare feet. I couldn't see, but I could hear. The breathing, deep, slow, inhuman. And then, the whispers. They spoke in a language I didn't understand, but somehow I felt the meaning, felt the words burrow into my skull like worms crawling through a corpse. You are chosen. You cannot run. You cannot hide. The king will take what is his. And then, always, always, the laughter. Low at first, almost human, then shifting, breaking, twisting into something else. Something that wasn't laughing at me. It was laughing through me, like it was already inside me. My reflection is wrong. I stopped looking in mirrors after the third night, because it wasn't me anymore. At first, it was subtle. Little things. My reflection blinking when I hadn't. My mouth smiling when my face was blank. Then it got worse. The fourth night, I caught my reflection standing behind me. I was brushing my teeth, exhausted, my body running on nothing but stale adrenaline and fear. I looked up, and my reflection wasn't facing forward anymore. It was turned around, its back to me, but I was still facing the mirror. I froze. My toothbrush fell into the sink with a soft clatter. My reflection didn't move. And then it started turning back. Not fast, not all at once. Just slowly. The head first, twisting too far, the spine cracking, bending at an unnatural angle. Then the shoulders, the arms, the fingers, one at a time, twitching back into place. But the face, my face, was wrong. The skin was too loose, hanging off the skull like wet paper. The eyes were too big, too black, too empty. The mouth was stretched too wide, and it was grinning. I ran. I slammed the bathroom door shut, threw a chair in front of it, and curled up in the corner of my room. I didn't move until the sun came up. When I finally worked up the courage to check, the mirror was empty. The game doesn't end. I thought maybe, if I just stopped playing, it would go away. That was my plan, until my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look. I knew what it was, but my hand moved on its own, my fingers ice cold as they swiped across the screen. A text from an unknown number. "You haven't played today." I stared at it, my pulse hammering in my skull. Then another message. "Choose a sacrifice. Number." I wasn't doing this again. I wasn't going to let this thing control me. I ignored the message. Then a photo came through. I didn't want to look, but I did. It was my mother. She was sitting in her living room, watching TV. A normal night, except the picture was taken from inside her house. I called her immediately, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. It rang once, twice. Then, "Hello?" Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. "Mom? Are you okay? Is anyone there with you?" She sounded confused. "Sweetie, what?" "No, I'm fine. What's wrong?" I opened my mouth to respond, but then I heard it. The breathing, not through the phone, behind me. I turned around, and I wasn't alone. The king is here. It was, standing in the corner of my room, the thing wearing my skin. But this time, it wasn't just standing still. It moved. Its head snapped sideways, bending at an impossible angle, the skin at the edges splitting open. Black liquid oozed from the wounds, dripping down its neck. Its arms hung limp at its sides, the fingers twitching, too many joints bending the wrong way. And then, it took a step forward. I backed up, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mom was still on the phone, her voice distant, muffled. "Honey? What's going on?" The thing took another step. I dropped my phone. And then, it lunged. I woke up, somewhere else. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was somewhere dark. At first, I thought I was blind. But then, slowly, the shadows shifted, and I saw walls. Black, stone walls, stretching endlessly in every direction. The air was thick, damp, rotten. The only sound was the slow, distant drip of water. Then, footsteps. Not human. Too heavy. Too wet. Coming closer. I tried to move, but I couldn't. My arms, my legs, they weren't mine anymore. Then, from the shadows, something crawled toward me. It wasn't fast. It took its time, like it wanted me to see. At first, I thought it was a person, but then it stood up, and I saw what it really was. The king. Its body was stretched, its limbs too long, its spine bent forward at a sickening angle. It had no eyes, just black, gaping holes where they should have been. Its mouth was stitched shut, thick black threads pulling the flesh together like a grotesque mask. But the worst part? It had faces, hundreds of them, hanging from its body like trophies, stitched to its arms, its chest, its back. Some were fresh, the skin still pink and raw. Others were rotted, sagging, half-melted, mouths still open in silent screams. And then it reached up, and it started peeling one off. I am no longer me. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up in my apartment, my bed, my room, everything exactly where it should be. Except I wasn't alone, not physically, but I could feel it, inside me, watching, waiting. And when I looked in the mirror, my reflection smiled. Not me, it. And then it spoke. Your turn. I don't sleep anymore. I don't eat. I don't drink. I barely exist. Because I'm not alone in my own body. I feel it inside me, wrapped around my bones, sinking its roots into my mind. I can hear it whispering in the hollow space behind my eyes, pressing against the inside of my skull like a second skin. And sometimes, when I pass by a mirror, it looks at me through my own face. I don't think I'm human anymore. It started with the little things. At first, I'd wake up in strange places, outside, in alleyways, in parking lots miles away from my apartment. My clothes would be torn, my hands covered in dirt, in something sticky and dark that smelled like rust. Then came the gaps in time. I'd look at the clock, and a few minutes later, hours had passed. Then came the voices. They weren't coming from outside. They weren't in my ears. They were inside my head. And then I started seeing things. The world is different. Now, I don't know how to explain it, but everything feels off. People don't look the same anymore. Their faces seem stretched, their mouths too wide when they smile. Their eyes are too dark, too hollow, like something else is wearing them. And when I walk through crowds, I can feel them. Not people, others. They watch me. I see them in glimpses, in reflections, just for a second before they vanish. But I know they're real, because sometimes they whisper my name, and sometimes they smile. The final sacrifice. I tried to fight it. I tried to pretend I was still me. But then, the game came back. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at my laptop, trying to remember the last time I had eaten. The screen was black. My hands were resting on the keyboard. And then, the text appeared. The king awaits. My stomach clenched. I didn't type anything. I didn't move. But the game didn't need me to. The next words typed themselves. Choose a sacrifice. A stranger. A loved one yourself. I clenched my fists. My fingernails dug into my palms. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't play again. I slammed my laptop shut. I grabbed it, lifted it over my head, ready to smash it into the floor. Then, my phone buzzed. I froze. It was another text from the unknown number. A photo. I clicked it without thinking, and then my whole body went cold. It was my sister. She was in her bedroom, sitting on her bed, headphones in, scrolling through TikTok like it was just another normal night. Except, someone was standing in the corner of her room. Not just someone. Me. I saw myself kill her. The video started playing on its own. I watched, helpless, frozen, as the version of me in the video moved. My sister didn't notice at first. She was too distracted, too lost in the glow of her phone screen. I watched my own body step forward, my movements too smooth, too calculated. Then, she looked up, and for a second, I saw it in her face. That moment of realization, that gut-wrenching, bone-deep horror, when you know, without a doubt, you are going to die. She opened her mouth to scream, and I leapt on her, not like a person, not like a brother, like an animal. My hands wrapped around her throat. She fought, her legs kicking, her fingers clawing at my arms. I saw her eyes bulge, her lips part, in a silent, desperate plea. But I didn't stop. I watched myself squeeze, watched her face go red, then purple, watched the veins bulge in her forehead, her mouth frothing, her body going limp. And then, she was still. The video ended, and a new text appeared. "The king accepts your sacrifice." I dropped my phone. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking, my vision blurring. Number? No, that wasn't real. I grabbed my keys, drove to her apartment so fast I nearly crashed 3 times. I ran up the stairs, my lungs burning, my hands shaking as I fumbled to unlock her door. I burst inside, and there she was, sitting on the couch, alive, safe. She looked up, confused. "Dude, what the hell? You look like you just saw a ghost." I couldn't speak. My whole body felt like it had been dunked in ice water. I opened my mouth, tried to say something, anything, and then I saw it, in the corner, the reflection in the TV screen. Me, standing behind her, grinning, and before I could move, before I could scream, it lunged. The king is watching. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up in my apartment. No blood, no body, no sign of struggle. But I knew that my sister was gone. And the worst part, I don't feel sad. I don't feel anything, because I'm not alone in my body anymore. The thing inside me, the king's will, it's stronger now, and I can feel it, taking control, whispering in my head, telling me who to choose next. And when I look in the mirror, I don't see myself anymore. I see him, and he's smiling. And I don't know how much time I have left, but if you ever find the king's game, if you ever see that message, do not play, because once you start, you can never stop.